Walk through a house today and try something simple. Count the rooms that actually do something. The guest room where no guest has slept in 2 years. The formal dining room, saved for a holiday that seems to get smaller every year. The home office that slowly became a place to stack boxes. The garage that has not held a car since the day the family moved in. Beautiful rooms, comfortable rooms, rooms that cost money to heat, money to furnish, money to insure. And most of them are just waiting to be used, waiting to matter, waiting for a purpose that never quite arrives. Now step into a different house, a smaller one, the kind your grandmother might have lived in, or her mother before her. The floors creak when you walk. The windows let the cold press in around the edges. The paint has given up in the corners, and nobody has bothered to fix it, because fixing paint was never the point. It is not a pretty house. No one would ever put it on the cover of a magazine. But here is the thing that would strike you, if you stood in the middle of it and really looked.
We'll hang it right here.
Every single room in that house had a job. Not a decoration, a job. The kitchen did not just hold a stove. It ran the household like a command post. The pantry was not extra storage. It was a small, quiet vault standing between the family and hunger. The cellar was cold and damp and a little frightening to a child. And it was also the family's workshop, its repair shop, its insurance policy. The porch was not for show. The backyard was a room without a roof. Even the bedroom, freezing on a winter night with 3 children under one pile of blankets, was doing work. It was saving heat, saving money, saving the family a little more time before the next hard decision. Nothing in that house existed only to be looked at. And that is the part the modern world has quietly forgotten. Because somewhere along the way, we stopped building homes that worked and started building homes that simply impressed. We traded rooms that did something for rooms that photographed well. We got more square feet and more comfort and more appliances than any Depression-era family could have dreamed of. And we got something else too. We got a house that cannot take care of itself. The uncomfortable truth is this. Those old families were poor. Many of them were truly poor, in a way that is hard to picture from a warm living room today. But poor was not the same as helpless. Their houses did not fall apart the moment money got tight, because their houses were built, physically and in habit, to survive exactly that. This is not a video about old furniture. It is not a tour of quaint little rooms from a simpler time. There was nothing simple about it. It was a system, a tough, patient, deeply intelligent system that ran through every wall and every floorboard of the American home. So today, we are going to walk through one of those houses, room by room, not as visitors admiring the past, but the way you would inspect a machine that once kept people alive. We are going to ask the question those families answered every single day, without ever saying it out loud. What is this room for? And what happens to us if it fails? Because by the end of this walk, you may find yourself looking around your own home a little differently, counting your own rooms, wondering which of them still work and which of them are only waiting. If you grew up in a home like the one we are about to enter, or if you were raised by parents who never let a corner of the house sit idle, then some of this is going to feel less like history and more like coming home. Let's open the door. Let's start where the whole house started, the kitchen. Not because it was the prettiest room, it rarely was, and not because it held the most expensive things, because it almost never did. We start in the kitchen because in a Depression-era home, the kitchen was not really a room at all. It was a command post. It was the place where every decision that kept the family alive was made, weighed, and carried out. Walk into a modern kitchen, and you see a showroom, stone counters wiped clean, a machine that makes ice without being asked, a refrigerator big enough to lose food inside of, and often families do. The whole room is designed to look like abundance, even when nobody in it knows how to cook. Now walk into the old kitchen, smaller, worn, a wooden table in the middle with legs that had been steadied more than once. And on that table, if you came in early enough in the morning, you would find the real center of the household. The mother, before anyone else was awake, sitting alone. There would be coins in front of her sometimes, not many, counted once, then counted again, because counting them a second time did not cost anything, and being wrong could cost everything. Beside the coins, a short list. Not a wish list. A survival list. She was not deciding what the family wanted. She was deciding what the family could carry until the next bit of money came in, and when exactly that money would come, and whether it would come at all. That is the thing modern life has quietly erased. A grocery list used to be a kind of math. Every item on it pushed something else off. Flour meant maybe no sugar this week. A little more coffee for the man of the house meant a little less of something for her. She sat there and did that arithmetic in her head, silently, so the children would wake up to a calm kitchen instead of a worried one. The kitchen commanded because it was the room where scarcity got turned into a plan. And here is where you start to feel the difference. A modern house can be full of food and still have no plan. You can open a packed refrigerator and stand there and genuinely not know what dinner is. The abundance is real, but the thinking behind it is gone. The old kitchen had far less on the shelf, and yet the woman running it could tell you 3 days out exactly what everyone would eat, and how one night's cooking would quietly feed the next. Nothing about that was magic. It was memory, discipline, and the kind of attention that only pressure teaches. She knew what was in the house, the way a captain knows what is in the hold. Not because she wrote it down in an app, because forgetting was not an option she could afford. But the kitchen was only one part of it. Because a command post is only as strong as its supply line, and that leads us to a room most modern homes do not really have anymore. The pantry. Not a decorative pantry with matching glass jars arranged for a photograph. A working pantry. Sometimes it was a real closet with shelves. Sometimes it was just a corner, a cabinet, a few boards nailed up near the coolest wall in the house. The size did not matter. What mattered was what it meant. The pantry was the family's vault. Understand what a vault is. A vault is the thing that stands between you and the worst version of tomorrow. That is exactly what those shelves were. They were the difference between a hard week and a frightening one. When the man of the house came home early because there was no work, when a bill arrived before the pay did, when the cold came in and stayed, the pantry was the answer to a question no one wanted to say out loud. What do we do now? And the woman who ran that vault did something that modern life has almost entirely forgotten how to do. She measured against time, not against appetite. Watch her hand move across the shelf. She is not counting how much is there. She is counting how long it has to last. That half sack of flour is not a quantity. It is a number of days. Those few potatoes in the basket are not a side dish. They are 3 dinners if she is careful, 2 if she is not, and she has already decided it will be 3. She does not think in meals. She thinks in distance. How far can this stretch? How far do we have to go? This is where the story stops being nostalgic and starts becoming uncomfortable. Because the modern home outsourced the entire idea of the vault. We do not keep a reserve anymore. We keep a delivery schedule. The store is always open. The app is always ready. The truck always comes. Until, of course, one day it does not, and a whole generation discovers that a full refrigerator and an empty skill set is a very fragile kind of comfort. The Depression-era family knew something we paid a lot of money to forget. Security is not having everything you want right now. Security is having a little of what you need, set aside, guarded, and understood. They were poor, but a poor house with a full plan can stand longer than a rich house with none. And there is an emotion buried in that pantry that we should not walk past. Guarding a vault is lonely work. She often stood in front of those shelves and felt fear that she never passed on to anyone else. She smoothed it over, closed the cabinet, and walked back into a kitchen where the children saw only a mother who had things handled. That composure was not decoration. It was a form of love. She carried the arithmetic so they would not have to. Now, a command post needs power. A vault needs a reason to open. And in that old house, both of those things came from the same place. The one thing in the kitchen that was never allowed to go cold for long. The stove. Coal, wood, whatever the family could get and keep. And this is the object people misremember most, because they remember it as a thing that cooked food. It did far more than that. The stove was the heart of the house, in the most literal way. It ran most of the day. It dried the wet coats when the weather turned. It warmed the water before anyone could afford to warm water any other way. It threw heat into a room that had no other heat to give. And on the coldest mornings, it did something you cannot put a price on. The family gathered around it. Not for the food, for the warmth itself. Children pressed close before school. The old ones pulled a chair near. For a few minutes, in a house where almost everything was rationed, there was one thing there was enough of, and it came off the top of that iron stove and touched everyone in the room equally. That is why the stove was more than an appliance. It was where the house kept its hope. A cold house feels like a house that is losing. A warm one, even a poor warm one, feels like a house that is still in the fight. That heat told the children, without a single word, that things were still all right, that the family was still holding. Compare that to now. Modern heat is invisible. It hums behind a wall. You set a number and forget it, and you never gather around anything, and you never once think about where the warmth comes from, until the month it stops. We made heat effortless, and in doing that we made it forgettable. Nobody presses close to a thermostat. Nobody feels grateful to it. It asks nothing of us, and it means nothing to us, and something quiet was lost in that trade. The old family paid for their warmth in labor and worry. They hauled the fuel. They watched it run low. They rationed the last of it through the worst of the winter and prayed the cold would break before the pile ran out. It was hard. Let no one pretend it was charming. But because it cost them something, it meant something. The stove was not just how they cooked, it was how they knew they were surviving. So look at what we have walked through already. A kitchen that did not just hold food, but commanded the household. A pantry that did not just store supplies, but stood guard like a vault. A stove that did not just cook, but held the family together with its heat and quietly carried its hope. 3 parts of one room, and not one of them existed only to be seen. And here is the part that should stay with you. None of this was written down anywhere. There was no manual. A mother learned it from her mother, who had learned it in years harder still. It passed from hand to hand, from kitchen to kitchen, from one careful woman to the next, until it became so ordinary that the children living inside it did not even see it as skill. They just thought that was what a house was. They were wrong about that. It was not just a house. It was a system that had been engineered by necessity and perfected by love, and it ran right through the middle of that little kitchen every single day. But the kitchen could not do the job alone. Because when something broke, when something wore out, when the family needed to make instead of buy, the house had another room waiting, a colder one, a quieter one, and that is where we go next. Every house had a room you did not show to visitors. In the old home, that room was usually below your feet. The cellar. Take the stairs down and everything changes. The air gets colder and heavier. The light gets thin. A child sent down for something would go quickly and come back quicker, because the cellar was the one part of the house that felt a little like it belonged to no one. Damp walls, a dirt or stone floor, the smell of earth and old wood. It was not a comfortable place, and it was never meant to be. And yet, if you had to name the one room that quietly held the family together when things broke, it would be that one. Because the cellar was the workshop, the repair shop, the place where the family fixed what a modern family would simply throw away. Look at what lived down there. A workbench, scarred and stained, a jar of nails, most of them used before, straightened out by hand and kept because a bent nail was still a nail, odd lengths of wire, a few tools, worn smooth at the handle from years of the same grip, scraps of wood that did not match anything yet, but might match something someday. To a stranger, it looked like clutter. To the family, it was inventory. This is where you meet the father of the house, in a way the front rooms never showed him. Upstairs, at the table, he might have been quiet, worn down, carrying worry he would not put into words, because putting it into words would have made it real for the children. But down here, at that bench, he was something else. Down here he was capable. A chair with a loose leg did not go to the curb. It came down the stairs and it went back up steady. A shoe with a failing sole was not the end of the shoe. A drawer that stuck, a hinge that sang, a handle that came loose in your palm, none of it was a reason to spend money the family did not have. It was a reason to go downstairs. That is the thing modern life took from us so smoothly that we barely noticed the theft. We stopped repairing. We started replacing. And somewhere in that trade, the cellar workbench went quiet in millions of homes, and then it disappeared entirely. Think about what that bench really was. It was insurance. Not the kind you pay for every month and hope you never need, the kind you build with your own hands and your own patience, so that when something failed, the family had an answer that did not cost a single dollar it could not spare. A modern home, for all its comfort, often has no such answer. Something breaks, and the only options are to pay someone, replace it, or live without. The old house had a fourth option, and that fourth option lived in the cellar. There is a dignity down there that is easy to miss. A man who could not always control the world outside his door, the layoffs, the prices, the cold economy that did not care about him, could still come down these stairs and control this. He could take something broken and make it work again. In a life full of things he could not fix, the cellar was full of things he could. That mattered to him in a way that had nothing to do with money. But the house did not only reach downward, it reached outward too. Because when the walls could not hold everything a family needed, the family used the one room that had no walls at all, the backyard. We have to be careful here because the modern eye sees a backyard and thinks of leisure, a place to relax, a place for a grill and a couple of chairs and an evening with nothing to do. That is not what the backyard was. In the old home, the backyard was a working room, a room without a roof, and it earned its keep every single day. The clothesline is where you see it most clearly. Line after line strung across a cold yard, sheets snapping in the wind, everything the family owned to wear hung out in the open air. There was no machine humming in a laundry room, spinning warmth out of electricity the family was paying for by the minute. There was the sun, there was the wind, there was a woman with a basket on her hip and pins in her apron, using weather itself as a tool. It was free. It cost nothing but her labor and her time, and she spent both without complaint, because that was simply how the work got done. Nearby, there was often the woodpile, stacked with a care that told you exactly how much that fuel was worth. There might have been a small patch of turned earth where a few things grew, not as a hobby, not as a weekend pleasure, but as an extension of the kitchen pushed out into the dirt. The backyard fed the family, warmed the family, and cleaned the family's clothes, and it did all of it out in the open, at the mercy of the weather, with no comfort offered to the people doing the work. Compare that to the modern yard, and something aches a little. Today, the backyard is often the least used space a family owns. Beautiful, maybe. Landscaped, maybe. And empty most of the time. We took a room that used to work harder than any other, and we turned it into decoration. We pushed the labor indoors, plugged it into the wall, and told ourselves that was progress. In many ways it was, but we should at least be honest that we traded a yard that produced for a yard that only performs. Now, if the backyard was the room the family worked in, there was another outdoor space that did something entirely different. It did not produce anything. It did not store anything. And it might have been the most important room the house had, for a reason that had nothing to do with survival and everything to do with pride. The porch. The porch was the face of the house. It was the one part of the home that the street could see, that the neighbors could see, that anyone walking by could take the measure of. and so it carried a weight the family understood without ever discussing it. Inside, things might be very hard. The pantry might be thin, the worry might be thick. But the porch was swept, the steps were kept. Whatever paint the family could manage went here first. Understand why that mattered so much. These families were poor, and poverty in those years carried a sting that is hard to explain now. There was shame attached to it, unfair and heavy. And a family could not always control how much money came in, but they could control this. They could control whether the front of their home told the street a lie or a truth of their own choosing. A clean porch said, "We are still standing. We are still a household with self-respect. Whatever is happening in here, we have not given up." That swept porch was not vanity. It was dignity made visible. It was a family refusing to let hardship strip them of the one thing hardship most wants to take, which is the sense that you are still a person worthy of respect. On a warm evening, that same porch became something softer. A place to sit when the day's work was finally done. A place to nod to a passing neighbor, to catch a little air, to belong to a street and not just a house. It cost nothing, and it held some of the most human hours the family had. The modern home, for all its size, often has no such face. The front is a garage door and a locked entry. We arrive by car, we go inside, and the street never sees us at all. We gained privacy, and we lost the porch, and with the porch we lost a little of the way a home used to say hello to the world. And then, at the end of the day, when the porch went dark and the stove burned low, the family climbed the stairs to the room where the house asked the most of them and gave the least in return. The bedroom, cold, shared, and doing more work than it ever got credit for. Picture it on a hard winter night. There was no warmth up here to speak of. The heat lived downstairs, around the stove, and by the time anyone went to bed it had mostly stayed behind. So the children doubled up. 2, sometimes 3 to a bed, not because there was no other room, but because bodies together held heat that bodies apart lost to the cold. Blankets were piled on, layer over layer, some of them worn thin, some of them patched. All of them counted as wealth on a night like this. Coats came off the hook and went on top of the pile when the cold got serious. Nothing matched, nothing needed to. Warmth was the only measure that mattered. That freezing shared bedroom was doing something. It was saving. It was keeping the fuel downstairs from having to reach a place it could not afford to reach. It was buying the family one more night, one more week, one more stretch of winter, without a decision no one wanted to make. Even here, even in sleep, the house was working. Even the coldest room in the home had a job, and the job was to get everyone through to morning while spending as little as possible on the way. And there was a closeness in that cold that the modern home, with a thermostat in every zone and a bedroom for every child, has quietly lost. Those children, pressed together under a mountain of mismatched blankets, listening to the wind work at the window, were cold, yes, but they were not alone. They had each other's warmth in the most literal sense. Years later, grown and gone and living in heated houses of their own, more than a few of them would remember that cold room, not with bitterness, but with a strange and stubborn tenderness. Because it was hard, but it was theirs, and they got through it together. So look at the whole house now, the kitchen that commanded, the pantry that guarded, the stove that warmed and hoped, the cellar that repaired, the backyard that produced, the porch that held the family's dignity out where the world could see it, and the cold shared bedroom that spent nothing and saved everything, right down to the last hour of the night. Not one room in that house was only for looking at. Not one room was waiting for a purpose. Every single space, from the command post upstairs, to the workshop below the floor, to the room with no roof out back, was pulling its weight. The house was not a collection of rooms. It was one working body, and every part of it had a job to do. Which leaves us with only one question worth asking. Somewhere between that house and ours, we stopped building homes that worked and started building homes that only impressed. And it is worth asking, honestly and without cruelty, what exactly we gave up in the trade. So we have walked the whole house now, from the kitchen table where the day began to the cold bedroom where it ended. And if you were paying attention, you noticed something we never had to say out loud. We never found a single room that was only there to be looked at. Think about that for a moment. In a house that small, in a life that hard, there was not 1 square foot of waste. Not one room waiting for a purpose, not one corner that existed just to be admired by a visitor who came twice a year. Every space, from the command post in the kitchen, to the vault in the pantry, to the workshop in the cellar, to the room with no roof out back, was pulling its weight. The house was not a collection of rooms. It was one living, working body, and every part of it had a job. And here is what I want you to sit with, because it is the whole point of this walk. That house was not smart because the family had money. It was smart because they did not. The intelligence was born from the shortage. When you cannot buy your way out of a problem, you have to think your way out, and think ahead, and remember, and prepare, and make every room do double duty. Necessity did not make those families weaker. It made them sharper. It made the house sharper. Take away the safety net, and what was left standing was skill. They were poor. Let us never pretend otherwise. Many of them were poor in a way that included real fear, and real cold, and real hunger, and there was nothing beautiful about that. But poor was never the same thing as helpless. That is the line the whole house was built on. A family could be short on money and still be long on knowing what to do. The pantry could be thin, and the plan could still be strong. The paycheck could fail, and the house could keep standing, because the house had been built, in habit and in hands, to survive exactly that. Now look at what we have today, and be honest, without cruelty, about the trade we made. We got the bigger house, we got the extra rooms, we got the comfort those families could not have imagined, the invisible heat, the food that arrives at the door, the store that never closes. And nobody in their right mind would hand all of that back. This is not a video that tells you the past was better, the past was harder, and comfort is not a sin. But somewhere in all that comfort, the house quietly stopped working. It stopped defending itself. We got rooms that only impress and forgot how to build rooms that survive. We outsourced the pantry to a delivery app. We outsourced the cellar workbench to a repairman we have to call and pay and wait for. We outsourced the backyard's labor to a machine humming in a closet. We handed every job the old house did by itself to someone else, somewhere else, for a price. And most of the time, that arrangement works beautifully. Until the day it does not. Until the truck is late, or the money is short, or the power is out, or the world outside gets uncertain and expensive and unforgiving again, the way it did back then. And on that day, a whole lot of beautiful modern homes discover they have no idea how to take care of themselves, because nobody in them ever had to learn. That is the thing those old families would want you to understand. They were not better people than we are. They were people who were never given the option to be helpless, and they answered that hard gift with skill and patience and a house where every room knew its purpose. So here is the question I want to leave in your hands. Not as an accusation, as an honest thing to carry with you when this video ends. Walk through your own home tonight. Really walk it. And in each room, ask the question those families answered every single day without ever saying it out loud. What is this room for? What does it do? If everything got hard tomorrow, would this space help my family survive? Or would it just sit there, waiting, the way it always has? You may find that more of your rooms work than you thought, or you may find that a few of them have quietly forgotten their jobs, the same way ours all did. Either way, you will be looking at your home the way your grandmother looked at hers, as a system, as a partner, as something that is supposed to work for the people inside it, and not just impress the people passing by. Because that is what those old houses really were, not quaint, not simple, not charming relics from a poorer time. They were proof of something we are in danger of forgetting, that a family with almost nothing can still build a home that stands, if every room in it is willing to work. They were poor, but they were not helpless. And the house was on their side. If any part of this walk brought back a memory of your mother's kitchen, your father's workbench, your grandmother's pantry, the cold bedroom you shared with a brother or a sister, then take a moment before you go. Subscribe to the Depression-era home so you can keep walking through these old houses with us. Give this video a like so it reaches someone else who remembers. And most of all, tell us in the comments, what room in your childhood home had a job? What did your mother, your father, or your grandparents do to keep the house working when times were hard? Your memory might be the very thing that helps someone else remember theirs. And if there is someone in your life who grew up in a house like this, someone who would recognize that swept porch or that cold, shared bedroom, share this with them. Some memories are too good and too important to keep to yourself. Because remembering these old homes is not just remembering old rooms. It is remembering a kind of love that never announced itself, the love that swept the porch and counted the coins and fixed the chair and piled on one more blanket and made sure that whatever else the family did not have, it always had a home that was still, quietly, on its side.